Stocks, and I'm a biology and psychology major at the University of Arkansas.
The piece I chose to research was A Warm Summer Evening in 1863 by Kara Walker, which is located at Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art in Bentonville, Arkansas. This piece explores issues of race and violence, specifically during the time period of the American Civil War. The background image is an etching from an 1863 newspaper of an African American orphanage being burned. This occurred after new draft requirements were set in place during the Civil War. A mob of New Yorkers started attacking both innocent white and black people in protest and anger. The mob is shown in the etching in front of a burning orphanage. The silhouette in the front is meant to grab the viewer's attention and create a higher emotional reality of the atrocities happening in the image. This image is significant because it informs viewers of the extreme cruelty that was imposed on African Americans during the era of slavery, and how racism is still a very prevalent issue today. The artist Kara Walker focuses a lot of her art on race, violence, and identity. What makes race such an important issue to Walker was the fact that at the age of 13 in 1982, her family moved to Georgia, where she was constantly harassed for the color of her skin. Most of her pieces are black silhouettes against a white wall which address American slavery and racism, often in a violent and unsettling way. Her work is purposely shocking and provocative in order to challenge the way Americans often avoid or softly talk about American slavery and racism. This art piece has a very distinct composition. The background is a tapestry made up of a newspaper article, and the foreground is a silhouette of a woman being hung composed of black felt. The lines from the trees draw the viewer's eyes to the flames coming up from the burning orphanage. The woman's arm creates a line pointing to men who are placing large things in front of a door to keep people from escaping. The image's hue is mainly monochromatic. They are all dark dual colors. Its value is achromatic because the colors used are only black, white, and gray. The texture of this image is soft and coarse because of the tapestry. The simulated texture is one of smoothness that all flows together. The art piece is stylized because the people and objects do not look realistic, but instead almost like cartoon characters. The methodology here is psychoanalysis, which deals with imagery, history, and creativity. It is meant to reconstruct the past and bring the relevance of the past to the present. Psychoanalysis in art takes personal imagery and reworks in a way that it attracts a cultural audience. This image demonstrates this methodology because it was created in the 21st century, but it is based on an event that occurred in the 19th century. It is based on a historical event and even has an actual image from the time period in the background, but the artist altered it by adding the silhouette in the foreground. The image was originally from the era of the Civil War. During that time period, it was significant because it showed the horrors of American slavery and why it needed to be abolished. Walker takes these past issues and relates them to the issues still prevalent today. This work is a contemporary piece focused on race and gender. It is influenced by social realism. This can be seen in works such as the Harriet Truman series by Jacob Lawrence. This artist painted works dealing with racial inequality and social justice. He painted Truman because she was an active abolitionist and a champion of women's rights. His work was meant to bring social awareness to the injustices facing African Americans, and Walker's work had the same purpose. The influence of social realism in her art can also be seen from the piece of A Portrait of a Couple Man with Walking Stick by James Verderzy. His work was meant to portray the lives of African Americans during the era of the Harlem Renaissance. He took staged photos in his apartment as well as documented African American life in New York City. This was a way of conveying African Americans as being equal with whites. This ties into Kara Walker art that is also trying to aware the public about cruelty on African Americans is just as immoral as cruelty on any other human. Walker takes feminism and social rights and creates gruesome scenes with them using black silhouettes. The point of these works is to bring social awareness to the wrongs that face African Americans with racism. Her work is meant to shock and inform society. So often, Americans try to sugarcoat American slavery and racism, and black artists through time make sure to show all the true horrors of it. The reason I chose this piece is because it immediately drew me in with the shocking image of a silhouette of a girl being hung. I was intrigued and moved by the image. It is an incredibly moving piece that makes the viewer stop and think. It's not just beautiful, but has a very deep, important meaning. This painting is meant to change the way the viewer thinks and make a difference in society, and that's why it's so special to me. The value of this piece is a psychological value. It is meant to provoke emotions such as horror, sadness, and awe. This piece is incredibly moving and is meant to change people's views about race.